Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. It's the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. I'm your host, Josh Treese. I've got a master's degree in marriage and family counseling and therapy, and I'm a practicing therapist in Music City, USA. I'm on a mission to help people more easily understand mental health and relationships and help break down the stigmas surrounding counseling and therapy. And that's why every week a guest therapist and I talk about a movie and what relationship or mental health issues it highlights. Thanks so much for downloading today's show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And while you're doing that, help other people find the show by giving it a 5-star rating and writing a review for it in the podcast app. Today in the theater, my guest is Musenge Luchembe Hayslett. Musenge is a therapist in Nashville who specializes in ecotherapy, which I'll let her explain in greater detail during the show. Musenge brought with her 2009's Avatar. IMDb says about it, a paraplegic Marine dispatched to the moon Pandora on a unique mission becomes torn between following his orders and protecting the world he feels is his home. But I'm guessing you knew that because up until this past summer, Avatar was the highest grossing film in history. Up until Avengers Endgame. So, you probably knew what Avatar was about. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. Dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. For the people, can you please tell us how to pronounce your name?
Yes. Musenge Luchembe Hayslett.
Musenge Luchembe Hayslett. Am I close?
Very close.
Oh, okay. Well, I will try to keep getting better throughout the course of our conversation. Musenge, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. It is just the biggest pleasure to meet you. And I like to start every conversation by asking my guest, why therapy? Why do you do what you do?
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor. Why therapy? And the answer to this question changes probably depending on where I'm at when you ask. But I think the consistent answer would be I was really curious about my thoughts, my behaviors, my emotions, and wondering, like, do other people feel this way?
About your own?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is a level of self-awareness that you don't hear much from lay people.
Yeah.
I didn't have it.
You didn't?
No. But you just had it on your own.
I did. I was a really quirky kid, and most people who knew me as a child are like, yeah, you were definitely special. I just felt like I walked in this world just like uninsulated and just porous and full of emotions, and I experienced people as sometimes as colors and songs, and very distracted, and that can be so beautiful but also so overwhelming when you're in a typical school where you have to focus and at least look like you're listening, and you're like, you're not listening. And I'm like, no, I actually really hear you. You know, just not in the way that is going to get me an A in this class.
Yeah. I'm taking it in more than anybody.
Exactly. I'm taking it all the way in. You have no idea. So I was really curious, like, do other people feel this way? And how do they deal with it if they do? But it was just something that I learned to deal with, and in some very beautiful ways, and then some very maladaptive ways as I was getting older, which kind of made me even more interested in therapy. So just being curious, and then kind of once I got to college, I was like, okay, let's see, what can I do that would help me, understand more? And I chose cognitive neuroscience. So, yeah.
Real easy.
Simple.
Yeah, sure.
And I got to learn.
This is in your undergrad?
This is undergrad. This is undergrad at UC Berkeley.
Okay.
But learned a lot about myself and realized there's no fixing this. I went in looking for a cure,
Sure.
but there was no fixing it. It was really, how do you learn to live with it
Yeah.
in this world? And that it's okay. Not everybody is neurotypical. So after that 7 years, I decided I would go to school for being a therapist. And I was like, well, what kind of therapist am I going to be? And I decided to go with somatic psychotherapy because it was the integration of mind, body, spirit, all of those things that make us whole. And it was very much in alignment with the experience that I had as a child, just having this really deep sensory experience of the world. And while I was studying, I was introduced to ecotherapy, which had been one of my ways of coping, was going out into nature, being regulated in nature. And growing up in Southern Africa, I had abundance of nature, just walk out my door, and I was, surrounded by a little bit more than I am here. I started doing ecotherapy, and that also became another modality of healing and insulating myself.
For yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
For myself. Like my first patient was just practicing on myself and seeing what worked for me.
So I try to gear the show towards lay people and not towards therapists. Mm-hmm. So, and maybe we'll get into this in our discussion of the movie, but can you give a brief description, if it's possible, of what ecotherapy is?
Yes. And we'll probably talk about it a little bit when we talk about the film. Mm-hmm. It was just, well, the premise is we are nature. We have human nature. And we have a reciprocal relationship with our non-human nature. With the trees, with the animals, with the dirt, with the weather, with the sun. Mm-hmm. And it's very reciprocal. It heals us. We heal nature. We can equally be as destructive to each other. And that's something that we can cultivate, and that's something that can be healing. And I noticed that the further we are from nature, the more disembodied we are. So
tell me about disembodied.
Yes. So the we're not as connected to ourselves.
Gotcha.
So usually if we're in an office with fluorescent lights all day and we're not engaging with the outside world, we tend to not really be connected with our bodies, what we're eating, what we're exposing ourselves to, and even what we're feeling. And so I saw a correlation there. So usually with my work with people is the more we get connected with our environment, the more people start to feel connected with themselves. They're able to kind of go into themselves. It feels safe to do that. It feels healing to do that.
Yeah. Currently we are sitting very close to downtown Nashville. How has your current practice location affected the type of therapy that you practice?
Well, I have another office. It's at Edwin Warner Park.
Oh, there it is. Perfect.
Yes. So usually when I do an ecotherapy session, we prepare for it. And we'll meet at Edwin Warner Park in the morning when it's not too busy and not too hot. And we'll have a session out there.
Wow. Mm-hmm. What would be typical to an ecotherapy session? Like, I I would imagine, I mean, at least for me, like I'm picturing a hike or maybe meditating or practicing contemplation in nature. What would be some things that you would do during that time?
So usually we would explore some of the themes that have come up in our therapy sessions. So usually I would like to start with, recognizing we're transitioning from, our busy city lives into a very quiet space where there's a lot of nature beings running free. This is definitely not a human place. This is more of their place, and just recognizing that and honoring that. And sometimes even asking permission if we can be there, in a sense, and starting to kind of really start to feel into the space. And that's like a little bit of a transition that I guide them through. And then we'll like enter, like there's usually a threshold, which will be like the trailhead, and we'll enter and just set an intention for the session, and we'll go from there. So sometimes there might be something that they're curious about, they want to explore, like why can't I make choices? And so out in the when there's multiple trails, I'll say, why don't you pick which trail you want to go on and just notice what comes up for you. And usually it's a similar thing happens in their day-to-day life. It's like, oh my goodness, I have all these choices, how do I decide? And just noticing the anxiety that comes up just around picking which trail to traverse.
That's very, sounds very experiential.
Yes.
Wow.
It is. And we tend to like, project a lot of what's happening in our lives onto scenes that we see in nature. So nature's very dynamic. I remember I had a client that had a really hard time with death, but there was a tree that was dead and decaying, and there was mushrooms coming out of it, and they were able to connect with death in that way. And that way it felt a little easier and more natural to connect with death that way. And it was easier to start the grieving process around human nature.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm hearing that you take what could be considered abstract or intangible concepts, experiences, and issues in a person's life, and you look for, through nature, ways that they can experientially or physically connect with those things in order to process them. That's incredible.
Yes. Yeah. And it's wonderful because, it's like the office, you come in, chairs always going to be there, couch is always going to be there, that the pillows are going to be there. But in nature, you don't know if that tree is going to be there again, and the creek may be dry or it may be flowing.
Yeah.
And, the deers may be out, and so it's dynamic and it's changing in the same way that we are, the seasons, and so I really, really enjoy being able to do that. And I've always had a hard time sitting down anyway, so being able to spend 40% of my time outside in nature and still doing my job is just
The best
thing ever. The best thing ever.
How does that affect confidentiality?
So I know Edwin Warner Park like the back of my hand, and we do talk about it. Like, I can't guarantee it, but I'm going to do my best. So I tend to go during times where there's very low traffic. I tend to take trails that are very low trafficked. So usually 9, 10, that's when you have moms in the strollers. They're on the pavement because they have strollers. So we'll definitely take the dirt trails. And I have little nooks and crannies around that we can tuck into if we need to process deeper or do a meditation.
Sure.
And so far, nobody's recognized me. Nobody's come up and said, hey, or anything like that. And it's been doing this in Nashville for 2 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of the ultimate way of doing here and now work because of how dynamic nature is. Exactly what you were saying. You don't know, is the creek going to have water in it? Is the tree going to be there? You have to be fully present
Yes.
in order to engage and experience, which ultimately is what we hope for in our lives. It's certainly how life works best. But I know that, I mean, I went through a time where that was really tough for me. And so I know that if people have trouble with that, that sounds like an incredible way for them to connect with themselves.
Absolutely.
Wow. So we're not in Edwin Warner right now. When you're not at Edwin Warner, how do you work with clients? Is it just sitting in the office? Do you take a walk outside?
Well, there is indoor ecotherapy. So ecotherapy has so many branches.
No
It's like
pun intended.
no pun intended. It that's good. So there's like horticulture, there's equine therapy, and they're all kind of under the umbrella of ecotherapy. So indoor ecotherapy is one, even urban ecotherapy is another. So I have plants in my office, as you can see, and under there I have like a little nature box with seashells and um, rocks and leaves and acorns and all kinds of little tangible nature things that I've picked up on the trail. So I do a lot of guided visualization, and bringing in those tangible nature objects. So I could do, I've taken people to beaches. I've taken people to Edwin Warner if we had been there before. Like, oh, remember we're going down that trail? Okay, let's walk down, and I'll guide them through
Oh,
it.
wow.
And just
Wow.
kind of really immerse their senses in that. And I'm pretty good at that because that was my problem when I was younger, is I would really be in
Yeah.
this deep sensory experience for a long time. So I'm able to kind of take them in there, like, okay, yeah, we're walking down, and you notice the canopy shading out the sun and the moisture in the soil, and the air is getting a little crispier, and I just really immerse them
Yeah.
into that. And they're actually just walking and sensing and starting to kind of relax and come into themselves a little bit more.
Wow. Um, how have you found that this superpower of yours, um, I guess, behaves while you're meeting with a client? Because I know, I mean, like part of our, training is, you know, really learning the skill of when you're in the room, being present for the client. If your own stuff comes up, learning how to not necessarily like stuff it away, but kind of acknowledge it and, you know, either dealing with it internally in the moment if you can, or kind of acknowledging it and saying, hey, I need you to step to the side for the next 45 minutes and we'll connect, afterwards. Have you found that, I don't know, how have you interacted with that part of yourself when you're in session?
Well, it depends on what that part is. So sometimes I use that part. So if there's something that comes up and I'm noticing um, some sensations in my body as the client is talking about an experience they had, um, I'll check in and I'm just like, could this be plausible? I'm wondering if they would experience a certain thing, something similar in that situation. And I'll just check in with them. I'm like, what are you noticing happening in your body right now? And then they might echo exactly what I'm experiencing. And then I'm like, okay. And if they say no, and then I'm like, okay, table that. We're not in
Mm-hmm.
alignment here. That's something for me to, put aside. But usually I use my body to be curious about what's happening in their bodies.
Yeah.
And sometimes that brings awareness to what's happening. Like I might feel something in the pit of my stomach, and I'm like, just wondering how you're feeling right here and here. And they'll check in and like, wow, yeah, there's something up for me there, and we'll explore it.
Yeah. Very body keeps the score.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very similar to what I would hope any therapist would practice is the more we as therapists connect with ourselves, the more tools we have in a session.
So I use what's happening inside, and also as therapists, we need to do our own work and make sure, okay, we know our stuff and when it comes up, what it looks like, and when to not necessarily use that because it
Yeah.
might have absolutely nothing to do with them.
Sure.
And I think that's our journey is kind of learning really what is undeniably just my stuff.
Yeah. That's why this is a career that requires so much schooling and training and regulation. It's not just based on personal experience. Because, like, if I decide when I'm 30, cool, I've lived enough life to where I can be a professional advice giver, and people just come see me, then whenever my triggers show up, they're going to bear the brunt of that.
Yes.
But through, rigorous training, it's a skill that we develop and have community that we can go to, have our own therapists that we can go to, have supervisors we can go to, have colleagues that we can consult with, so that we can do our best to be truly present.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, let's talk about a movie.
All right.
What movie did you bring for us to talk about today?
The Avatar.
Avatar. Whenever I brought this up on Disney Plus the other day, I was shocked that this movie is 10 years old.
Oh my goodness.
Which it's probably a sign that I'm getting older because I'm saying that more and more now. Like, I can't believe this movie came out in such and such a date,
10-year anniversary, and I'm like, well, I feel like I just watched that a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I also don't think I had seen it since I saw it in the theater. Like in 3D, the whole big shebang, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a pretty long one, and it makes so much of an impact, I feel, and it's not one of those movies you want to watch over and over and over and over and over. And
Highest grossing movie in history up until this summer. Endgame beat it.
Wow.
And now Disney owns them both, so
Smart.
yeah, they're happy. So why did you choose Avatar?
Well, just that I really appreciated that it's not a perfect movie in any sense, but it's a beautiful movie, visually it's just breathtakingly beautiful. I love all the colors.
Oh my goodness, I'm just connecting with how you described your experience of stuff. And when it comes to Avatar, this must have been practically like a drug trip to you.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I was in the theater just like just taking deep breath. I mean, just everything about this movie was just
Now, when you go to see a film like this in a movie theater, are you doing something similar to when you go to Edwin Warner? Are you looking for a time that's less busy so that there is less sensory input from others in the room with you? Or are you just going there opening night with a full house?
Oh no, never opening night. Because then I'm getting a sense of the people next to me, which is even more overstimulating. Like I'm noticing their breathing. It's hard for me to tap into myself, which I want to. So I'm definitely not. I never do opening anything. I'm probably gonna go 2 or 3 weeks out in the morning.
I've done the same thing.
Yeah.
If there's a movie that I know that I just want to like hone in on, middle of the day on a Monday or something like that. So what was it besides the visuals that you felt like connected with you in this movie?
Um, I'm just, my experience, once again, just feeling this interconnectedness with my human nature and non-human nature. So the people around me, the forest, what I eat, and just feeling that that's very natural to all of us, and necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all kind of want a relationship with nature. I've noticed in a lot of movies like the Avatar is we look at indigenous people and we're really fascinated by how connected with nature they still are, and there's a part of us that really wants some of that, or at least for myself,
Mm-hmm.
that really wants some of that. And um, I appreciated that message, and that's part of what I try to do is we have access to that. We don't need to live in the forest to be a part of the forest. We don't
Mm-hmm.
need to necessarily completely estrange ourselves from society to have a connection with nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciated that piece.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a common thread that runs between us, living in urban, suburban society and going and connecting with nature, be it at a park, a farm, or wherever, and which is where we came from,
Mm-hmm.
and us maybe in a therapeutic experience going back and connecting with our pasts
Mm-hmm.
and maybe pursuing integration
Mm-hmm.
and taking steps towards dealing with, processing, accepting traumas, hurts, hang-ups, relationships, things of that nature that maybe we had tried to get away from.
Absolutely. I like the tree. I really appreciate the tree. That was it was like the container.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's what holds everything. It stores everything. It's sees everything, and it doesn't have any bias or, um, yeah, it doesn't have any bias or judgment. It's just like this is life. This is the way things are, and I'm holding this history of this place,
Mm-hmm.
present, past, future, um, and I guess maybe some way we do that
Mm-hmm.
as holding. Our clients come in, they tell us, what's happened in their past. We hold that. Their aspirations for the future, we hold that. Don't have necessarily any agenda of how things should go, but we just kind of facilitate this process of maybe guiding or experimenting where things could possibly go, just the possibilities.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated like the spaciousness that was in that movie. Like things don't have to be so predetermined and rigid and structured.
Yeah. Sigourney Weaver's character, I think her name was Grace.
Mm-hmm.
I'm terrible with character names.
Me too.
She said at one point, and I think she was talking about the live tree, but there was also a second tree that was kind of like willow looking
Mm-hmm.
with lit up leaves and branches. But she talked about it being like similar to a neural network
Mm-hmm.
where it stores memories and they can use it to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
and it can store information. And she actually compared the I guess ecosystem to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought in that scene last night, I have no idea what I thought while I was watching this 10 years ago, but in that scene last night I thought, I feel like the Marines and the corporation that's there, they're going after the wrong thing. Like they're going after this element,
Mm-hmm.
this unobtainium, when they have a living neural network there that they could study and reproduce, and like they're just going after a rock.
Yeah. An unattainable
Uh-huh.
rock. Well, that requires a lot of violence in order to obtain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, could have probably done a lot of good
Mm-hmm.
with that type of technology.
Yeah. Which I thought to my, even as I'm like recalling that scene, and then Grace and Jake's interaction with the head of the corporation guy, I remember thinking last night, as I was watching it, nothing in this movie is subtle. Like, everything in this movie is turned up to 11. The visuals, the color saturation, the character models, and all of the personality archetypes are just as loud as, I mean, you've got the evil corporate greed guy who is practically, pyramiding his fingers and snickering and laughing about money. And I don't care about anybody. You've got the gruff, aggressive Marine guy with the 3 big scars across his face, and, soldier, I'm going to fight and I'm going to kill you, and this kind of thing. You've got the, scientist lady who at first looks down on, Jake because he has no training, and you're just going to come in here and tell us and do this and do that. And you've got the guy who lost something near and dear to him, his legs, and now he's going to, try to get that back through this experience. And you've got the characters of the Na'vi.
Yes.
And it's just like, which is typical James Cameron, I think, from his other movies, but like everything is so unsubtle.
Yes. 10 all the way through.
Yeah. And I remember when the movie coming out, everybody saying like, oh, he's, Cameron is a save the earth, war is bad, all of this stuff, which I thought are, I don't know, like surface level messages of the movie. Because I do think while the movie's not subtle, there are layers to it that I think, we can all gather something from. I think the most obvious of which is, especially considering how you practice, just our connection with our environment. And how our environment can serve us not just as a location, like, hey, I'm going to go to the lake. Hey, I'm going to go to the forest. Hey, I'm going to go to the beach. But as a way to... I'm saying this and it almost seems too obvious, but as a way to experience life, as a way to have life, as a way to do life, to be in the here and now, a way to do that. But I also think that the movie speaks a lot about relationships too. Did you get anything out of it about that?
The complexity of the relationships, yeah. Well, of course, there was the main romantic relationship and the interspecies relationship, the relationship they had with their bodies.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice the avatars had more fingers and toes than the Na'vi?
No, I didn't.
The Na'vi had 3 fingers and a thumb and 4 toes, and the avatars that the humans went into had 5 fingers, 5 toes. And eyebrows, and the Na'vi didn't have eyebrows.
Did not notice that.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to have to watch it again.
What do you think that the main character in Avatar, Jake, what do you think that he was missing that he found in his time with the Na'vi?
Connection. I'd say connection. When he arrived, he was kind of like, I'm just here. I really don't care about too much. I'm not really invested in anything. I've lost everything that was important to me, and I think he was able to connect with what he does have. I think they were able to bring out, you do have these other strengths. You don't need this body in order to experience love and romance, in order to respect nature, in order to push yourself. Um, yeah, purpose, value.
It seems like he learned kind of the act of connecting as well. Differences in him and the Na'vi are pretty great. I mean, I don't know if there could be more differences. And yet, he fell in love. He connected with not just her, but with her parents, the chief of the tribe, the person who led the spiritual practice of the tribe, her mother, the head warrior who was going to marry her. He connected with everybody. And, here's something that I'm wondering. In watching it, do you think that he connected on his terms or on their terms?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
I think on their terms in the beginning, because this is how you have a clean kill.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is how you engage with nature. You are almost like a little bit subservient to nature. You're not...
This is how we do things.
Yes, this is how we do things. These are our customs. These are our traditions. These are our laws. And this is why. And if you don't do it this way, you're being very disrespectful, and you're going to die, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is also part of it. Part of these customs are part of survival.
Mm-hmm.
But towards the end, he dared to believe that, no, actually, I'm going to get on this, bird that I'm not supposed to be worthy of, and I'm going to try this. So he kind of ended up pushing himself to do things that they hadn't necessarily tried to do themselves.
Yeah. I almost wonder if that's a little like playing jazz. I had a guitar teacher several years ago who was in his late 50s, early 60s. He had been playing guitar since he was, I think he said, 7.
Mm-hmm.
So for over half a century.
Yeah.
And knew music theory forwards, backwards, sideways, upside down. But he learned from a jazz perspective. So by learning music theory so well, he knew all the rules and he knew how to break them. And I wonder if, by Jake starting off his relationship with the Na'vi by coming under their, not coming under their rule, but I guess just following, listening, following, that he could, at the climax of the movie go, I'm going to go jump on that red
pterodactyl-looking bird.
Pterodactyl dragon. Because I believe that this will help us. I believe this is what we need. Mm-hmm. This is something that's for the good of the greater good. Mm-hmm. Whereas if he would have tried something like that at the beginning, instead of listening, say, oh, that's not one that we, if he'd have tried it then, he'd probably end up dead.
Yep. Oh, yeah. He didn't even know how to fly in the beginning.
Yeah. There's also a really literal connection thing in the movie because they have that part in their ponytails that when they, I don't know what the right word is. It's not tame, but when they select an animal to ride. They connect with, it's like a USB plug,
Yes.
plug it into an outlet or something. Like they connect their ponytail to the animal's ponytail, and I guess in a way their neural systems kind of sync up.
And they have a bond,
Mm-hmm.
an unbreakable bond.
Yeah, and they said that the flying creatures, they only ever bond with one rider, and that's it.
Yes.
Which I don't think I remember them saying that about the horse-looking ones and the cat-looking one.
No, just the flying, the bird.
Pterodactyl dragon thing.
Pterodactyl dragon alien. Yeah. And that, how will I know that I've been chosen by it? It'll try and kill you.
Mm-hmm. Which I rewound that part 2 or 3 times because I thought originally he said, or she said, he won't try to kill you. But then he had asked, how will I know if he chooses me? He will try to kill you.
Yes.
That's, okay. That's great. Cool.
So-
Were there any, so I feel like with a lot of the movie, the things that we're pointing out, I don't have a better term for this, would be like positive things that we're taking from the movie, things that maybe, would be helpful to try out or consider or adapt to in our relationships. Things like being curious when entering into a new culture, being open when engaging with new people, being respectful. Was there anything in the movie that would kind of go to the other side that maybe is an example of something that could be harmful to a person if undertaken? Besides the obvious, like, they're the bad guys, everything they do is bad, don't do that. Like, that's obvious.
Yes, yes. Don't, colonize and, destroy people's land, give ultimatums. I don't know. What were you thinking? I can't.
I don't know if I had anything, but I think, like, the majority of my work is with people with addictions, and so I spend a lot of time in the 12 steps. And one of the main things that the 12 steps teaches is for a person to always ask, what's my part in this? And so I can't help but, whenever I look at any story, there's always good guys and bad guys and conflict and things, but very rarely in real life, if you and I have a conflict, are you all the way the good guy and I'm all the way the bad guy?
Okay.
And so I can't help but always kind of ask when I'm engaging with a story, is there anything that the good guys are getting wrong? Is there anything the bad guys are getting right? Is there,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Jake was definitely a flawed human being, like all of us, I think. Because he really wasn't connected with anything, he wasn't really loyal to even himself, really, or I think his values that he may have had.
If he knew what those were.
If he knew what they were. I'm pretty sure at some point he did. He was a soldier, and I'm sure he stood for something. But when he started the Avatar, he didn't really stand for anything. He wasn't very loyal to
No pun intended again.
Oh, goodness. I'm full of puns today. I think I'm probably full of puns most of the time. Don't even know it. Didn't really stand for anything, and really, hurt people and gave the wrong information to people that you could just tell had no good intentions.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to do that to a group of people you were familiar with, let alone a group of people you're not familiar with. It was just, he didn't have a side. He didn't have a...
Where do you think that he made his choice? Because at the beginning, he was clearly okay with and even kind of excited that the main military guy approached him and said, I want you to feed me information. Like, he was on board. I wouldn't say it was too long after he met the Na'vi and kind of, I guess, met them corporately. I don't think it was too long after that he was genuinely, maybe not totally with them, but with them.
Yes.
While still coming back and giving information. Where do you think it was that he picked a side?
Well, I imagine when he was initiated into the tribe, because he really felt the need to go back into that ceremony and have that rite of passage, even though he said, once I'm initiated, I'm in, but I feel like he wanted to be in, or wanted to see what it felt like to be in.
He wanted to see what it would feel like to be in.
And once he was really, like, it became real, like any rites of passage. I've definitely gone through a few myself, and it just feels like, yeah, you know you're happening, you know you belong to this group of people. But then when you have that ceremony and, you know, you just see everybody around you and they're celebrating you and they're honoring you and they're like, yeah, come on. It becomes real, it becomes solidified. And maybe he was wanting to see if I'm going to feel something then, if I'm really going to drop down into this, you know, tribe of people.
Yeah.
So I think that was the turning point. I mean, I know he loved her, and that you could see that from the beginning. There was some attraction, and it was building and building and building. But I think maybe the initiation ceremony was helpful, was a turning point.
That maybe feels like when he connected with the greater group of people rather than just the individual that he had been with.
Absolutely.
I think that's true. Yeah.
It's like you know, like a differentiation that happened. Like he was part of the army family. This was his army dad, and you know, I want to please this guy because this is what I know. And then he's like, well, now I have this whole new family and this whole new possible father and mother and brother, and
Yeah.
and they accept me. They don't use me. And
Yeah.
there's actually nothing that they want from me. You want something from me. They're giving to me. So.
And what's interesting too is that the main military guy was promising him. He never said how, but he said, "I'll make sure you get your legs back. I got it approved. You can leave tonight." That was right before the ceremony, you know. And even with that, he still made the choice because I think he just got so much more what he was truly looking for. And I think you mentioned the word differentiation. And I think that's spot on. You know, he was loosely still connected with the Marines. He even says at the very beginning as he's wheeling himself off of the aircraft, once a Marine, always a Marine.
Yes.
So he still held that identity, you know, very close. But then by becoming a part of the Na'vi, found a new identity, which is ultimately, you know, what every one of us, I guess, strives to do, you know, in our late adolescence and college and young adult years.
Yes.
We try to figure out who in the world are we, you know, where do we belong, who do we belong to, which
do we deserve to be here?
Well, yeah, which is, I mean, gosh, I mean, I'm 39 and I still ask myself that question all the time.
Yeah, me too.
Especially at the very end, you know, I guess if we're looking at levels of differentiation, totally human in the avatar body, being initiated, and then at the very end, human's consciousness being transferred totally and permanently into the avatar body.
Got a lot more than he felt that he deserved.
Yeah, he found a family.
Yeah. I think something about bringing it back to nature, I feel that way a lot in nature, and I think a lot of my clients feel that way in nature. Like there's so much to be grateful for here. It's free.
Yeah.
This is free. It rains. I have water. I have sunshine. I definitely feel that way a lot being outside because there are some parts of, well, I've lived in some parts that are not so not so beautiful, and that are really lacking and really polluted. And
Hmm. Do you as a person feel uh, more disconnected from yourself in those spaces?
no, not necessarily. I just feel more connected to the parts of me that may or may not be so pretty.
Okay.
Yeah. So even in ecotherapy, I don't always take people to the most beautiful, pristine places, because sometimes there are parts of us that are dark and tarry and sludgy that we need to connect with, that are just as much as part of us as those nice, bubbly, clear creeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That feels important.
Like the destructive parts of ourselves.
Yeah. It feels like you're saying you're not trying to idealize those parts of a person.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, let's go to this pretty park and pretend like everything is great. And nah, I mean, sometimes the work is you go into the valley
Mm-hmm.
and you deal with what's in the valley.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I do like to go to the pretty places, though. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. There's definitely some swamps that I've taken people to, and places where there's snakes. That's in my informed consent, though. You know, I am not responsible for any snake bites or
I
drowning.
can't
Or
control nature.
I cannot control nature. Please don't sue me or the property, the
Yeah.
landowners. And then some places just naturally, even though they're beautiful, they hold a lot of pain. You know, like if you go to a plantation, like, oh my goodness, look at this place. People get married here, but, you know, there's also a lot of suffering, and there's also like a lot of other stuff you feel there.
The beauty can contain pain. The pain can contain beauty.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really integrated mindset that I feel like is natural and unnatural. I think it's natural in that it's life. It's the way things are and should be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if a person is just kind of in default mode and they haven't kind of connected with themselves in a deep way, that feels very unnatural.
Yeah.
What do you mean I can have both of those things in the same moment, in the same part of my story?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean I could get to a place where I don't try to brush all the things I'm not proud of under the rug?
Yeah.
What do you mean, even though I have everything I could ever want, I still feel lonely? Like having both in the same.
Yeah. And seeing that we can hold both, nature holds both quite seamlessly.
Yeah. Huh. The more I've heard you talk about ecotherapy, the more, which I'd never heard of until I met you. The more I see how good a job it can do to help contain all of these things.
Absolutely.
Like it can hold so much,
Mm-hmm.
and it can show so much, and then you can experience so much in it.
Mm-hmm. And just experience yourself holding all of it as well.
Yeah. Wow. Is there anything else from the movie that stands out to you?
Well, something that was touching for me, I guess, that I hadn't noticed the first time I watched the movie. But I don't know, just, you know, you watch a movie in different places in your life, different things stand out to you. Was when the shaman, when Jake and Sigourney Weaver, scientist, I can't remember, they had all been handcuffed and, you know, tied up and restrained because they were traitors. She freed him, and
She freed the shaman?
yes, the shaman freed him, freed them all.
Mm-hmm.
Did she free them all or just him? Well, I know she freed Jake and just said, if you're really one of us, help us. And it just felt so like, we get second chances. just felt just like a very act of, I mean, desperation, but also humility.
Yes. Grace, even.
Mm-hmm. Grace.
Because in the moments before, that was kind of this, oh my gosh, you're not who you say you are. You have led them here. You are a traitor. It was this moment of, I guess, ultimate hurt.
Yes.
And then to ask someone who you have felt hurt by for help.
Yes.
That is humility.
Yeah.
And it's grace.
Yes. Which are things that I feel like I've learned a lot from my clients.
Yeah.
Humility and grace.
Well, let's move into that. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about what you've learned from your clients.
Yeah. Well, just humility, grace, bravery. You know, when you have a client come in and they're talking about what's happening with them, and you realize that's something you feel really touched or moved. You're like, oh, that's something I probably need to work on. That's an area that I haven't explored.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking at, wow, you came to me wanting to explore this thing that it had never even crossed my mind as something that I could trust with another person. And so having that happen probably on a weekly or monthly basis is just, it's just amazing, and just makes this work so fulfilling.
Yeah.
And, you know, makes me want to work on myself. Because I feel like you can only take your clients places that you've gone. So I'm just like, well, I guess I need to start tackling this.
Mm-hmm.
And walking with them, even though they may not know, we're walking through this together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just really reading and processing over here. But just the courage to actually do my own work.
Yeah.
My clients have taught me that. Just the willingness to trust, to really let somebody in,
Mm-hmm.
and what that looks like, and how far that can go. And just like in the same way, there's, you know, nature is a reciprocal relationship. I feel like there's definitely a reciprocal relationship we have with our clients,
Mm-hmm.
where we're learning from each other. We're experiencing each other. So I've gotten, you know, through ecotherapy to go places, the same places, but with them, and experience it with them the way they're experiencing it.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes with a lot of trepidation and fear in a place where I feel like it's my backyard, but when I go there with them, I was like, oh, I can see how you could be afraid of this given your story. So I get to like walk with them, and be with them and hold the space.
Yeah.
So I get to be a witness. Yeah.
We gathered with my wife's extended family for Thanksgiving, and at some point, I didn't even realize this when we were having the meal, but the coasters, when you flipped them over, had a question on the back of them. So we went around the table, and you'd read your question and answer it, and then everybody else would answer, you know, the same. And one of the questions was, who has inspired you this year? Mm-hmm. And really quickly after whoever read it, somebody at the table jumped in, and you can't say your spouse. So I was like, ugh. So it got to me, and I said, you know, my clients have inspired me, mm-hmm. because I love the way you phrased it. I get to bear witness to people showing the courage to walk into the toughest areas of their life, willing to change. And that is not something that I ever want to take for granted, or something that I ever want to steward poorly or show up halfway for.
Yes.
You know, because I think to be given the honor of the responsibility to do that is very meaningful. And it's I don't take myself very seriously, but I take that very seriously. Because I was given a lot through that process. And I still don't quite know how I get to do it, but I'm really glad that I do.
Yes. I'm like, oh goodness, what did you do to deserve me?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm gonna really show up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna really show up.
And it's, you know, I've oftentimes told my clients that, you know, my office, this is a laboratory where you and I can practice healthy intimacy. You and I can practice things in relationship that then you can take out into the world in your circle of family, friends, teammates at your job, and live out. And in the same way that they get to practice, it's a constant reminder for me of to be present, to show up, to bring your whole self, to, you know, listen, to, like they say in the movie, to see somebody.
Yes.
You know, a person, I was telling a client yesterday something from a book I had read in grad school from a guy who worked with people with autism. And he said in the prologue that a lot of times people will describe people with autism with the behaviors that they do. Especially what they would consider maladaptive behaviors. And he said, you know, looking at somebody as the sum of their deficits is dehumanizing. We have to realize, this is him still, that these behaviors are their attempts to cope with and process the world around them and to control and deal with their experience of it. And so what if instead of we viewed these things as deficits, we viewed them as things that made them uniquely human? And that was the name of the book, Uniquely Human.
Okay.
And I think that, you know, whenever I get to sit with a client, I'm constantly brought back to the place of, this is a unique person who exists in the context of a story, who exists in the context of a world that is unlike any other world. There's nobody else who has the same formula to get to that person as they do. And I'm never going to fully understand them. They're going to be the expert on them. But I can be here. And if I can't know every answer, which I don't have to.
Yes. Thank goodness.
Yes, I can be with them in the not knowing. Which I think is something, when I started therapy, I thought, if I study enough, I'll know everything I need to know to help everybody I can help. And then, I mean, I'm still pretty young in it. You know, I've been doing it 2 years, but in that short amount of time, I've realized, I don't have to know every answer. In fact, sometimes people aren't looking for an answer.
No.
They're just looking for somebody to sit with them.
Yes. Even though sometimes they will ask you, what should I do?
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I was so relieved when I realized I don't have to know the answer. I just need to be present and hold the space so that you feel safe enough to explore what works for you. And I actually like not knowing, because I get to walk with you and, you know, peek behind these doors and try different things. It's very refreshing. It's kind of like I give this example of, I don't know, something in nature which is going to grow. Yes, there may be something in its way. Like, you see these trees that have grown around cars and signs, and it's going to find a way to do it. And I trust a lot of my clients will find a way to be with their situation in a way that's supportive and I don't want to use the word healthy or for them if they have that like
Yeah, in a way that works.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we're just naturally geared towards self-healing if we have a holding environment. So I don't need to necessarily do too much other than hold and be safe and contain.
Yeah. Let's say that somebody has been listening to our conversation and they think to themselves, I want a piece of that ecotherapy. I would like to come see Musenge as a client. How can they get a hold of you?
Well, the best way would be to go to my website, www.musengetherapy.com. That's MUSENGE therapy. And fill out my contact form, and it'll come to me, and I'll contact you for a session.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I would imagine that your clients are all going to be in the Middle Tennessee area. I'm sure that you have some colleagues that maybe do some telehealth. I would imagine ecotherapy tough to do via Skype and FaceTime and.
Yes, I do see some clients when they're traveling, or if they have to, leave for holiday and they want to maintain.
But that's an
the
exception.
therapy.
It's not a rule.
It's an exception because
Yeah.
I can I've already have a felt sense of who you are, and I've been with you in the room. We've been to the park together. I know
We've got a rapport.
We have a rapport. I could do some guided visualizations via telehealth,
Yeah.
but I don't do telehealth.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're in Middle Tennessee and you want some of that ecotherapy, then click through to that website, which I'll put into the show notes just in case people are scared of spelling like I am. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It has just been such a pleasure. And I am so excited to learn more about ecotherapy.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being able to talk about it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
sit with you today.
Absolutely. Well, thanks. Hey, everybody. This is Josh, and for the 49th time this year, we're going to wrap this episode up. When I launched Therapist Theater back in January, I knew that it was something that I really wanted to do. I also knew that my personality was the type that I wanted to have it perfect before it got its wheels under it and started down the runway. But I also knew that if I was ever going to get it started, I just had to get the ball rolling. And I think when I did finally do that, I didn't know how long it would be able to last. Not out of a lack of desire, just out of I've never done a podcast before, so I don't I don't really know what I'm doing. I just do it. And here we are, last episode of 2019, season finale of season 1. And we've put out 49 episodes, which I think I'm really proud of that. It's a really big deal. During the course of this season, I've had the chance to meet and talk with so many incredible people who help people for a living, who have dedicated their lives to helping others walk open-eyed into the pain and the toughest parts of their lives. And in the midst of that, help them to change. And I think that's the biggest deal. And I think it's the coolest thing. And I have walked away from interviewing every guest that I've had the chance, the honor to sit with, just in awe, and uh, have been so thankful that I had the opportunity to do that. And so I want to say thanks to every guest that's appeared on this season. Um, I mean, it has certainly benefited the show. It certainly made the show. But I think beyond that, to sit and have a small chance to get to know you and the work that you do and to learn from you has just, I would count it among, the coolest things, the most awesome things that I've had a chance to do in my life. Um, and so thank you. I appreciate every one of you. And thank you, listener. Without you, the show wouldn't be a show. I guess it would just be me talking into the void. Uh, but throughout the course of the year, um, you've texted, you've emailed, you've commented on the show's social media, you've reached out to guests, you've reached out to me, and you've let us know that the show is accomplishing its mission. It's doing what it is that last fall I had the dream of, and then in the winter of this year set out to do, and that's helping people connect with mental health, helping people learn about relationships, and helping people through that uh, make a choice to maybe do something they thought they couldn't do. And that's just something that I can't believe that I get to be a part of. And I'm just so thankful. So thank you, guests. Thank you, listeners. It's been an incredible 2019, and I can't wait to see what 2020 brings. So, I mean, I guess, housekeeping items first. The show's going to go on a 2-week break. When this comes out, it will be on Wednesday, the 18th. So the following Wednesday is Christmas. So no new episode on Christmas. The Wednesday after that is New Year's. No new episode on New Year's. So the season premiere of season 2 of Therapist Theater is going to be on January the 9th, 2020, which it was on January the 9th, 2019. So we're keeping with that date. Seems to be working out okay with us. Now, you'll notice if you look at a calendar, though, that January the 9th of 2020 is a Thursday. So we'll actually be changing the release day of the show. So instead of the show dropping on Wednesdays, now the show is going to drop on Thursdays for 2020 in season 2. So just know that we'll be stepping back for 2 weeks, but as soon as January the 9th of 2020 hits, be right back there with you. In kind of thoughts on the episode, I think that the thing that stuck out to me the most that Musenge said was just the concept of connection. The whole worldview of ecotherapy is connecting with the environment as a way of connecting with one's self. And I think that in the movie of Avatar, looking at the concept of how the Na'vi connected with their environment, but also how the Na'vi connected with each other. Connection's important, guys. And I can't help but, as I say that, reflect on just the process of making this show. I've been able to connect with so many great therapists and counselors, teachers, writers, hope dealers in the case of Nate Larkin. And I've been able to connect with you. And, before I moved up to Nashville, before I started grad school, I used to have this, I don't know, doodle or saying that I would conclude a lot of things that I wrote with. And it was, we is greater than I. And I really believe that. I really think that connection is something that we were made for, that we're hardwired for, and that it's the conduit, it's the vehicle, it's the method that change, healing, hope, love, compassion happens in. Connection is the magic stuff. It's the good stuff. It's what life is all about. It is my sincere and total hope that over the course of these past 49 episodes that you have been able to connect with the show, but more importantly, that you've been able to connect with something inside of yourself. And if that has led you to connect with others, then I think we're doing something right. And I hope that in 2020 that we can keep doing it. Raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that for this week, this year, and this decade, the theater is closed.